Cool.
There we go. So should be a bit of a lag, but this is Helena. I've never heard your last name pronounced out loud, but I think it's Eastern European, so it's Kerschner, right?
It's German, actually.
Oh,
My mom's side is the Polish one, and then my dad is like a German Amerimut.
do you know where the Kirsch comes from or what it means?
I think it has something to do with cherry trees or something like that.
Huh.
And then the area in Germany, because I actually looked it up on Ancestry, is like, I forget what the town is, but I have seen what town they are from in Germany.
Have you visited there yet?
No, I haven't. I've never been to Germany. I have been to Poland though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you can't you can't compare the two.
No, I can't. I can't. And I haven't really spent that much time in Poland either. I've only been twice. I have been meaning to go back, but there's just been so many issues with travel. But I would like to go back.
What were you doing when you were in Poland those two
Visiting
times?
my family. I have an aunt there who I was very close to her when I was younger, but she moved back to Poland, and so I got to see her for the first time in like 17 years, the last time I went. So it was very cool.
Did you guys do anything of note?
Well, she really likes to cook, so she like made this whole big spread of like Polish foods that I know take like a day to make each. So that was pretty awesome. Yeah, she made that for me and my mom and my brother.
Okay. Were there any
Yeah.
sites or like garden activities? I don't. Do they have gardens out there?
No, there's no gardens in Poland.
No, no, like
No, they don't
parks
have
or
that. No,
lakes.
they don't have that.
No.
No. Just kidding. Yeah, there's a lot of parks and gardens, and yeah, we spent some time in Warsaw, and then we also spent some time in Siedlce, which is the town that my aunt lives in. And so in Siedlce, there's not much to do. It's mostly like rural. It's actually a really interesting look for a place because it's very rural, but there's these old Soviet like high-rise apartment buildings, and they're like gray and like blocks, and it's really weird against the landscape of like rolling hills and farmland.
Very
So
brutalist.
there's hmm?
Brutalist. I think that's the style.
Yeah, it's a really interesting environment, but there's not much to do out there. So most of the sightseeing we did was in Warsaw, and we went. There's like palaces that you can go and tour, and um, yeah, there's like the old. Most of Warsaw was kind of destroyed during the war, World War II, and then they salvaged like one little part of it, and then they like obviously built back up what had been destroyed of it, but they managed to like save quite a bit of it. So there's a really interesting part of Warsaw where it does look like old architecture, and then everything else like really has a lot of Warsaw has been built in maybe the last 30 years.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's an interesting place. I like Poland.
Have you ever been into history? Did you get into that?
A little bit.
Yeah. I was just wondering
Not
if they have palaces. I don't know anything about the Polish dynasties.
Oh, it's yeah, I don't know much either, but yeah, they've oh my gosh, there's like so much history there. I feel like Eastern European history, although Polish people don't like being called Eastern European, they're Central European, but they interact with Eastern Europe throughout all of history. There's just so much that goes unexplored by like the kind of traditional like what you learn as an American about world history. That like kind of Slavic um, Eastern European history just is so untapped, but I don't know much about it. But the more I do look, like there's just so much. Like Poland and Lithuania had like hundreds of years of like mutual war and drama, which like you don't really like think about that as an
Kind of like just like
American.
the turf
But
wars.
yeah, kind of like that. They actually, you can look and see old, like, offensive racist comics made by the Poles about the Lithuanians or by the Lithuanians about the Poles. And it's just like really offensive, horrible shit about each other. So it is kind of like the turf wars.
My best friend is Lithuanian. Well, his through his father's side, and he's actually working translating his grandfather's novels, because his grandfather wrote copious amounts of literature back in that period of time, I guess middle of the last century. But the cool thing about the Lithuanian language is it's kind of one of the oldest languages, like directly related to what we think of as Indo-European. It just kind of got
Mm,
frozen in time, or it just kind of took a
mm.
different developmental path, or it didn't continue to evolve. So you have a lot of linguistically, it's just kind of a very fascinating language.
That reminds me of Hungarian. Hungarian is a really weird language because, from what I understand, it's similar-ish. Like it's a very unique language, but out of all the other European languages, it's similar-ish to Finnish, which like you wouldn't really expect because Finland is like all the way up there, and then Hungary is in Central Europe.
Hmm. Embedded.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of embedded, you've been doing your media tour keeps on getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Eventually, Ivanka Trump is going to have you on her podcast, or at least McCall Peterson, perhaps, maybe. But
Yeah, maybe that would be cool. I like Jordan Peterson. I'm going on Tim Pool next
oh,
week.
really,
Yeah. Yeah, so I have to travel and I'm pretty nervous about it.
about the traveling or about the
All of
beanie
it.
one? Yeah.
All of it. Well, I'm nervous about the traveling because my cat was recently diagnosed with a chronic condition, and so like she's not going to die or anything, but she just like needs a little bit more care, so traveling is a little bit harder, but I have
Hmm.
everything figured out for that. But also just nervous because yeah, that's a big audience on that, and that's pretty scary. And also, I don't do as well with like group conversations.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
better one to one, but in groups, it's really easy for me to just get stuck in like listener mode. Like I like to just like kind of sit back and just like look at everyone and listen and then not really speak myself. It's kind of hard to get myself to speak up
Well,
in
I
those
would say that you're
situations.
not a bad looker, but there's random people that get upset whenever I compliment you. So
Yeah.
I'll abstain from that. But the interesting thing about Tim Pool is, so you were on Tucker Carlson, and YouTube took that down, or at least the preview of that, and they put it back up. But Tucker Carlson's got a huge audience, but it's a totally different audience than Tim Pool's. Tim Pool's audience is closer to your actual Gen Z wheelhouse. So, like, this is more in line with your media atmosphere, your aquarium, right? So I think that the impact, I could understand how you would be more nervous about Tim
Yeah.
than Tucker, even though from an outsider's perspective, it's like Tucker's much bigger deal than Tim Pool, but impact's
Yeah.
different.
And with Tucker, because it is like a legacy media institution and there's so much production involved that offers like a kind of a degree of separation between like me as the person and the way that I am being presented to all these
Yeah.
people, that it feels a little bit safer. But then with something like Tim Pool, like that's just going to be me for 3 hours talking, hopefully openly because I'm not very good at filtering myself. And I don't know, who knows what'll happen.
Wow.
But
And that's live, right?
well, yeah,
Wow.
live, yeah, and yeah. So we'll see, we'll see.
Oh, Upper Hand Mars, our friend, mutual friend Mars at Broadcast. He says, Tim Pool, you're so close to getting on Joe Rogan podcast.
I
LOL.
am trying that. Like I'm trying to make that happen. Joe Rogan followed me, so that was pretty crazy. And I don't know, we'll see if that happens. I feel like that could be a possibility, but that would be, I think, a really good experience. Because I think Joe is like such a good interviewer, and I think like I don't have that fear of. Well, obviously, it's also a one-on-one conversation, but I don't have that fear of kind of like clamming up like I do with the Tim Pool thing. So I think Joe would be good, and obviously, really big audience. I think a lot of people would hear the message. So
And you all started right here. Well, no, not really, but kind of.
it kind of did. This is like your channel was the first thing that I ever did. So Hold on, let me tweet this out
Oh
really
yeah, go
quick.
ahead, or you can just retweet mine. I do need to close the
Yeah.
door, but I can wait for a bit while I interface with the chat while you interface with your fans. Oh no, I'm not going to read the OnlyFans comment, but
Are people making disgusting comments?
not disgusting. I think it was chat. We have a very friendly my channel. I've cultivated a very friendly group of folk.
They're not gonna call me a trad e-girl.
Okay, well, you know what? There was this interesting tweet that you liked. I don't want to read this out loud, but you know what? We're just going to go there because you liked it. And this is again, it's like these overlapping discourses, where you have, and we've spoken about this specifically with your arc throughout the media universe. You've gone, you've written extensively about Tumblr, and I will link. Please remind me to link your Substack piece, which is brilliant, in the description. But you have been involved in internet discourse for a long time. You were through the Tumblr thing, and then when you started to come out as a detransitioner, you got plugged into the feminist thing. And that
Hmm.
was a period of time, and we spoke about that specifically, where you're like, well, am I just entering into another ideology? Well, who am I? What am I doing? And now you're kind of I mean, you're just you. So I don't know how conscious you are about producing your outward facing persona or your brand or anything like that. But
I'm not conscious at all. I don't allow myself to be conscious. I just kind of like throw shit at the wall.
yeah. And some of the shit is pretty funny. I just wanted to read this. This is what you liked. Speaking of trad girls, and this is a parody account for anybody who doesn't know what a
Yeah, yeah,
parody
yeah.
account
I
is.
think I
This is
know what you're about to read. It is a parody.
this is the trad e girl with flower. I drink so much milk, my breasts are just getting so ginormous with a G. And I have to keep them all to myself because I can't find any trad men. Sad. So there's like, what is the meme thing about the trad girl? So I guess we should just try to define what a trad girl is and then how it's turned into a meme and like what it actually kind of means.
Yeah, so I am a little bit of like a internet global citizen. Like if you think of all these different like echo chambers and like rabbit holes that happen, at least on Twitter, I feel like I have like my toes in various ones without completely imbibing myself in them. So there's like I do follow a lot of right wing accounts that can be very interesting. And in kind of like the right wing Twitter sphere, there's kind of this tension between like these so called trads, which are, I guess, are
Yeah.
mostly like they're people who kind of like romanticize the 50s and have kind of very like 50s kind of Protestant like ideas about gender roles and marriage and relationships. But you'll see these same people who kind of, they talk a lot about sexual morality and chastity, but they will also have these kind of like intense, like sexually charged underpinnings of kind of the things they say. And a lot of people wonder if, like, to some degree, it is kind of like a kink. Like that these like you'll have these girls who call themselves trad and they're just like, oh, I've been drinking raw milk and my breasts grew 3 sizes, and it's like your entire audience is male and you're supposed to be trad and like Protestant. So
So
it's
okay,
just
so that's what the intersecting with the e-girl, which is an interesting phenomena. Well, I mean, we all
yeah.
kind of know what an e-girl is. I mean, you aren't an e-girl, but I guess you could technically be called an e-girl. But an e-girl is
What
specifically
is a nigger?
about cultivating male attention by being kind of like a demi girlfriend of some sort.
Yeah, yeah, that like parasocial
Yeah, but I think
relationship that
I
it's
think
very
the e-girl
one-sided.
is about the friendship and the you're getting that female attention, and then you get the suitor or the simp,
Yeah,
as it's called nowadays.
yeah.
And so the trad market is ripe for the plucking or picking or nibbling or griping. Groipers are another thing. I don't even know what those are, but
Oh,
it's
right.
inevitable that there would be a carryover between those two things. A woman or female attention exploiting that, not necessarily exploiting that, but harvesting the attention that's already there in that stylistic aesthetic community.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's just like a lot. there because you have like these are mostly kind of young people who they've grown up online with this kind of like weird way of relating to sexuality and people on the internet. Like you do have a lot of this kind of like parasocial, like people will call like they'll say Twitter is a dating site because it's like people will like develop feelings for each other and be like DMing each other, but they live in like separate countries. And it's just like, it's really interesting. So you have people who are like growing up in that kind of environment, but then they're adopting this relatively shallow ideology about like return to tradition. But I don't think like as somewhat just due to their age, but also due to, their lifestyle for most of their life. Like they don't really have a concept of like tradition. Like they didn't grow up in like a traditional family. So I think there's just a lot of room for there to be something really interesting that kind of brews there in that meeting of these situations that I guess is becoming a meme on right-wing Twitter.
So in right wing Twitter, there are these trad movements. There's also the anime avatars. I don't know if they overlap with the trad folk, but there's all these things. I need to do a deep dive into right wing because it's fascinating. There's a lot of stuff going on over there that's verboten. It's not spoken about, so it's like uncharted territory in a lot of ways. But I just wonder
Yeah.
about the use of irony within the trad community. So, how are you comfortable with like? Have you really invested your time into this? Do you kind of understand the code just on offhand, or do you kind of understand the dynamics a little bit deeper than that?
I'd say I'm a passive observer. I've
Mm-hmm.
never really like invested myself in these spaces beyond like I have some mutuals. Like I have some people I follow and they follow me back. We don't really interact. I don't know. I don't use social media really in that way anymore, where I'm like on there, like trying to get involved in like
Okay.
friend groups and like make friends and stuff. I have a very different relationship to social media than most other people that I'm following on social media.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't understand the social dynamics from a place of actually being involved in them, but I do observe them. I follow an eclectic range of people. And so I just feel like I have this weird experience of like seeing, like drama in a community, but then like other communities' perception of that drama, or like a certain community's perception of the views of one community, and like what then that community thinks of the views of another community
Yeah.
and the behavior. Like it's just really interesting seeing how like there's these just kind of the internet has a way of secluding groups of people based on kind of like very similar personality trends and views about things. And then like those people then don't really have access to like understand other groups because they're so deep down in their group. So yeah, it's interesting. I feel like I have an interesting perspective
You're a
on
bit of
these.
an anthropologist with a veneer of neutrality,
uh, a little bit, a
or
little
at
bit.
least kind of disinterestedness or not non-investment beyond curiosity.
Yeah, non-investment I think would be a good word because I am very interested, just not very invested. And honestly, I think right-wing Twitter is a little bit more fun just because there's just so much less of like policing. Like there is policing on some things, but it's like you're just people are so much more able to just like come out, say something retarded, everybody makes fun of them, but then gets over it. Whereas on like left-wing Twitter, it's like you step out of line and then you're like forever banished, and they will like continue bringing it up for 2 years.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so we've kind of established that there's this trad community that you're kind of flirting with, not in a flirtatious way, but you're just kind of like your toes in the water kind of thing.
Yeah.
Then there is the insult being called a trad wife e-girl, which I'm assuming is coming from another community. Another community has weaponized that term. So what is
Yeah.
the negative connotation, and where's that negative connotation coming from? Who's wielding that?
I don't 100% understand it. Especially I don't understand why it's being thrown at me, but I guess like there's and I'm not really sure what is being communicated when someone is being called a trad wife by certain groups. So the group that has most often like called me that is, I could say radical feminist, but I think this is kind of a different kind of radical
The
feminist where it's
Mad
like,
Femmes?
yeah, they're a lot younger. It's more of like the dynamics are very very similar to like trans communities. It's just a slightly different ideology,
Hmm.
but it's just like these young females who just have this kind of behavior pattern that's really common in like left-wing young spaces. So they're a distinct group from the older kind of like Gen X rad femmes. So those aren't the people I'm implicating, but it's those younger rad femmes that call me a trad wife, and which is
Hmm.
very interesting to me because I am not trad and I am not a wife.
Well, okay. Could you give us an example of the context in which they sling that barb upon you? Is it just
I
random, willy nilly, or is when you say something about Ben Shapiro?
Yeah, I think it has to do with the fact that like you know, I don't have a view of gender that it is like a social construct invented by men to oppress women, and that we need to like liberate ourselves from all of this. I think that
Wait, hold on. Let me
like
do that with you.
yeah. Yeah, I don't think we need to liberate ourselves from everything to do with gender, and I don't think we need to liberate ourselves from our bodies. But that's
Wait, are
something.
you intimating that or suggesting that there are certain young rad femme-ish sorts who are dissociating from their bodies or have a problem with the body or certain relationships with the body, certain
I
openness about
mean,
sex, or I would assume it has to be about sex.
yeah, I mean, there's just like there's kind of a narrative that, well, I mean, I guess they might say that it is society that places oppression on the female body, and then you need to liberate yourself from that oppression caused by society. But in practice, to me, it feels like some people are interpreting it as the oppression is located in my body, and then therefore they have an antagonistic relationship with their body and a fearful relationship with their body, and the liberation is achieved through altering the body processes or suppressing the body processes.
You're finding this in kind of rad femme-ish circles? Because this sounds very TRA or lib femme.
But it's a little bit different. It's like, like the, for example, like the importance placed on birth control,
Okay.
that the female oppression is found in the way that society or males take advantage of the female capacity to become pregnant and bear children. So therefore, in order to liberate yourself from that, you must have full autonomy over your body's capability to become pregnant and bear children, and kind of like not uh, entertaining or not considering that that pharmacological suppression of the natural female bodily functions might not actually be all that good for the woman. It might not be all that good for your body, but that's kind of like you can't really talk about that. It's just like birth control is necessary. We need
Okay.
birth control to be as accessible as possible. And so I think that's one example of how I understand where they're coming from, but I do think that for a young woman who already struggles with her body and has an antagonistic relationship with her body, I can understand how that view of oppression can really easily lead to like a even furthered antagonistic relationship with the body, where the biggest fear is about pregnancy and about the female body's functions. And those functions are seen as,
Hmm.
if your body engages in them, like that will subjugate you and chain you for life. There's kind of like just
Hmm.
this like absolute fear of that,
Yeah.
which, like I said, like I understand it, but I think that there are better ways to approach that relationship.
The consequences of pregnancy for a female are profound. And
Mm.
so preventing that or aborting that pregnancy allows for the concept of liberation or empowerment or freedom from those consequences. My question that I've asked before and gotten a lot of blowback on, but I don't think those people following me anymore is once we start to go down the path of tinkering or tampering with fertility, what are we tinkering and tampering with on a societal level, on an archetypal
Mhm.
level, on a mythological level? I always go to the poet land, but just on a societal level, there was a couple years ago, there was that some clips surfaced on the internet of this woman or this female, who had gone to get an abortion, and she was interviewed about it and how traumatizing it was that nobody was using her preferred pronouns. And I just kind of
Mhm.
saw that was very interesting that you have somebody so disassociated, or it could be the case that somebody's dissociating so far from fertility that gender ideology or the pronoun is just another barrier of that. And that is a psychological mechanism that is not healthy, or one
Yeah.
way of dealing with that, of not processing or avoiding processing that. And, being kind of libertarian with regard to people's choices and stuff, I don't know to what extent the government should be involved in the abortion, but I don't think that it should be a conversation that's just about rights and freedoms. I think we
Yep.
should listen to and look at the consequences of that. And so that kind of puts me in the trad ebro category. And maybe that's where you get some blowback with the trad, because you are advocating or in favor of a more holistic or responsible
Yeah,
relationship with your body.
that's exactly how I would describe it. Like my perspective that I'm coming from isn't like return to hardcore no sex before marriage, strict gender roles, no birth control, make birth control illegal, throw anybody who does any of this in prison. Like that's not at all where I'm coming from. I'm just asking like, okay, so it's a drastic shift in society for sex and sexual activity to no longer be intrinsically linked to pregnancy. And in a lot of cases, it still is, like birth control methods fail. But I think as a society, we've really had a transformation in thinking about sex as something entirely separate from not only these, very profound physiological processes, but also in many ways as separate from relationships and as separate from the self and the other person. It's just kind of begun to be its own separate thing. And I'm just wondering, like, what are the consequences of that? Like, what are the implications of that change in society that is very, very different from the way that humans have necessarily had to view sex and relationships because of the real and profound implications of sex and pregnancy. So I'm just wondering, like, what are the consequences of this? What does this change in our society? What do we learn about people through how this has manifested in society? And also, is the ability to engage in things without risk, is that the only thing that matters in whether a human being is able to have a good relationship with that thing?
Mm-hmm.
Is sex not having risk and not having meaning inherently better than sex having risk but also having meaning, just because it doesn't come with that risk? Like, I
Well,
think these are
yeah. Well, the
important
problem with
questions.
meaning is that it's not just a syntactical thing. Meaning is embedded in a system of meaning. So once you say that something is valuable, you have to say, why is it valuable? And then you end up having to make choices about what's good and bad. And in a liberal society, broadly construed, we are not allowed to say what's good and bad.
Yeah,
So there goes
yeah,
meaning too, perhaps.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
I
I'm
just
not
need to
even
say
the
to the
one.
chat really quick so I'm not distracted. We'll get to your questions, and do ask your questions to Helena, and we'll get to them later on in the show. So I don't have to take notes right now. So,
I was just going to say that I'm not even prescribing what is good or what is bad necessarily. Like I'm well aware of my shortcomings in terms of like experiences. Like I've never I've only been in one relationship with a man. Like I've never been in a position where like sex has been very like complicated, or these things have been very complicated. So I'm very aware of my limited perspective in that sense. So I'm not even, I'm not telling anyone what to do. Like I've just like had these questions as a young woman who has really struggled with like my body. What is my relationship to my body? Who am I? What is a woman? Am I a woman? Rejecting being a woman and then coming back to being a woman. Like, I think these are completely understandable questions to have, but because they're not along like a certain doctrine that, for one reason or another has become, the accepted way to look at, uh, you know, re-identifying as a woman, and what that means, then I'm a trad wife when
Hmm.
first of all, I don't even really know what that means. Why is it an insult? But it's used as an insult, so I
What
guess I'm
do
going to
you
take
are you
it.
insulted by it though?
I'm insulted by just like, and I guess you can't really expect much from like Twitter, but these are people who kind of, I at once, these are a lot of like other re-identified, detransitioned women who I guess
Okay,
I at one point felt like, we have something in
sisterhood.
common. There's kind of a mutual respect. So I guess I'm just a little bit insulted by like the lack of understanding and just like forming this caricature of who I am and then like using that to insult me. Like that it does bother me
I don't want to get gendered, but sounds like a little bit of a female dynamic going on in some spaces that you're plugged
a little
into.
bit, little bit.
Reputation sabotage, and I know that men do that. And Mary Harrington would say that we're all a bunch of bitches now because we're all just interacting on a purely social level. So all of
Yeah.
the fighting that goes on is very feminine, even from the male, female typical. We target reputations, we bicker, and so on and so forth. But it can be very intense. There is a profound amount of meaning in woman, right? So right on people are asking politicians, can you define what a woman is, and everybody's kind of looking for a certain answer. And I think about this a lot because there's more meaning in woman than the one with the large gamete, than adult human female, than you know, I don't know, XX chromosomes or anything. Like there's a lot of meaning in there. And I think there's more
Yeah.
meaning in woman than man in a way. Or maybe it's just me because of the way that I'm built up. But it does seem that women react very strongly about the definition, or very guarded about the definition, at least in my experience of feminism dating back to the 90s, when I interacted with people my age who were feminists, or females my age who were feminists. They're very concerned about the definition of words and using words correctly, especially around what a woman is. And then you go from the word definition to these interesting phrases that are trotted out as arguments, such as don't blame the victim, or are you accusing me of asking for it because I'm wearing a certain dress or something like that. There's different kind of argumentative tropes that kind of come up that are clung to. And maybe that's just anybody who becomes kind of an NPC or like a purveyor of an ideology just ends up falling back on certain coded phrases that they look for reasons to speak, because then they know what to say and it's their time to speak and they have the doctrine to lay down on them. I just bring that up because it can be very intense in certain communities,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially when it has to do with, I guess, the issues of bodily autonomy when we come to women. That's a hot button
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah, that is a rough one. As for the definition question, I would say that the definition of a woman is an adult human female. But there's, there's so much more to what something is than purely its most simplified, most fundamental linguistic definition. Like there's, especially when it comes to human beings, like we as a species have more to our understanding of the world than what can be summarized and defined. We have all of these, experiences that are beyond verbal. Like we have experiences that maybe we don't even notice, we aren't even consciously aware of, but they still interplay with our lives and the lives of others and the environment. Like, we're incredibly complicated, kind of like multifaceted creatures. So I
I'm not
think
going to argue
like
with
that,
that.
yeah, the definition of woman might be adult human female, but the meaning of woman, I think that there's so much more like life and variety in that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a little bit where I feel kind of stifled by the feminists sometimes. Not because I think I agree with the trans, perspective that, a woman is a
A feeling.
concept that's fluid. I don't agree with that whatsoever. But there's kind of this view of it where it's, woman is adult human female and everything else is just gender stereotypes. Like, there's the
Hmm.
adult human female and then there's the stereotypes.
Then
When
there's
I
the
think that
gender.
there's
Yeah.
there's a lot, more to it than that. And I
Take
think that, yeah, these gender roles or stereotypes or whatever, like, they're a part of humanity. They don't completely deserve to be banished.
it might be because during wartime, there's just different attitudes that go on and a different kind of intensity, and maybe it could be the case
Mm.
that, especially within turf land or the turf wars, that the definition is the land that they're guarding. They're saying no,
Mm.
this is so they're guarding a territory. That doesn't mean that what the territory has to offer is defined by its definition or by its what's around a border, right? So they're
Yeah.
just defending the border. That doesn't mean that they're not going to grow anything on the border when they're not fighting against encroachment or something like that. So
Yeah.
switching from
Good
war
point.
war to garden war room thinking to garden thinking might just be kind of like a failure in conversation. Like, what's the cool thing about being a woman? What's
Okay.
awesome about being a woman? And having more of those conversations might be a cool respite from just defining what a woman is or saying that's not a woman or something like that.
That's actually a very interesting question, and that's something that, like, I am trying to find an answer to, and I don't have a concrete answer to it yet. Of like, what is awesome about being a woman? Because I've noticed that when you have men who are very pro man,
Hmm.
they they can answer that question of like, what is good about being a man? Like, masculinity, we are X, Y, and Z. Like, that comes to them. But then you have the female version of that, the women who purport to be pro woman. They can't really say what is good about being a woman because everything associated with women is just stereotypes, and it's not inherently a part of being a woman.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I think I'm glimpsing what you're saying. So let's just say like the manosphere, people, men who promote masculinity or are in some capacity promulgating that or speaking to that, they can be
Male chauvinists.
they can be very procedural about that. It's like a man is somebody who has responsibility. A man who
Mhm.
is somebody who takes care of his wife and children, right? So it's very
Mhm.
declarative, very
Yeah, there's
mansplainy in a very definitive
there's
way.
both a celebration but also a prescription
Mm.
for how to, improve upon
And
these
be that and
areas.
realize that. Okay. And then
Yeah.
within certain realms of the opposite, separate but equal land, I think it might be complicated because a lot of femininity does have to do with the family. It's manifested through
Yeah.
motherhood, sisterhood, through caring, and through the transaction of the very deeply meaningful relationships of caring for a family and being enmeshed in a unit and being somebody who provides. And it can be seen through the lens of, the last 100 years of at least American culture, that's kind of subservient, that a lot of that stuff being nurturing is not as exciting or as important or valuable as being courageous, right? So I think
Yeah.
we're inculcated to see that as soft and therefore weak and not really
Yeah.
honor the power and the necessity of that in certain spaces. Or there's trauma around being forced to be a way that you don't want to
Yeah.
be, right? So there's a cool, really interesting and fecund, fertile, rebellious streak in feminism that can give rise to a lot of unlocking of potentials and stuff like that. But it can go overboard and kind of betray a lot of very core qualities that that, through history and biology are just kind of what makes us function as a society, and also gives our lives so much cool smells and bread.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it's like what is so people will say correctly like a woman is not just a small man. I think that's completely correct. So then what is that
Mm.
difference? And if you're going to take the biological approach, it is the different reproductive systems. And if you look at the woman, that reproductive system, it's got a lot more going on than the male reproductive system.
Mm.
And as a result, it does tend to have a great impact on our lives because it is a very, profound, involved thing. And the consequences of using it are like going to be major. But if that really is what differentiates the man from the woman, even on just a purely biological level, why do we hear people saying women aren't just baby making machines? Like, I feel like that's such a disrespectful way to like talk about women. I don't know.
It's
That's how
like
I
speaking
feel.
about defining them negatively. They're not just that.
Yeah,
Which
like,
I can
when you
see if,
talk,
you have
but
a
like
story about the patriarchy controlling women through their reproductive processes, and a lot of people can adhere to that because there's a lot of evidence for that. But if that's the story you're basing it off of, then you have to rebel against that. And so it's kind of a negative relationship to that powerful process, which leaves that powerful process off the table as something to discuss and explore and investigate.
yeah, off the table as something to appreciate because like listening to what you were saying about how, a lot of femininity is, attached to the family and to nurturing. And I was just thinking like how would I have, back in like when I was a feminist, like how would I have felt listening to that? And I recognized that I would have felt really angry that you were insinuating that women are
Oh,
just
okay.
baby making machines, that like, oh, femininity is just, being barefoot and pregnant and serving your husband and his kids.
Being the
Like
trad
that's
wife.
being a trial wife. Yeah. That would have been the reaction that I would have had maybe 2 years ago to what you were saying.
Okay.
So, and then I was having a reaction to my reaction, that like that's just such a shallow and disrespectful way to look at like what makes us women. Like it is what we are. Like that is the reality, that we have these bodies and they're different from male bodies, and like they mean something, and it's not just something you can like throw away
Hmm.
and say that that has nothing to do with who we are, and that who we are is just like our career and like what interests we have and stuff like that.
Yeah. Man, how many likes you got, or your cooking blog? But I guess that's another feminine stereotype. As long as you put in enough paragraphs about how you're doing this as a rebellion, then you can finally get to the what do you cook? Pie recipe? That's one time you showed up baking a pie. You had a pie. You made a
Oh
pie, didn't
yeah.
you? Peach
Yeah. I
peach pie.
I think it was for like Thanksgiving or something.
This was a while. I was with Wokel. It was a few months ago.
Yeah. Yeah, and I had been making a pie. I do like to bake, and I take pride in my
Is there something recent
baking.
that you've been perfecting?
No, because I
You're
wheat
gonna
makes
go
my
on Tim
tummy
Pool,
hurt.
so. Oh, wheat. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so when I bake, it's like I have to take that L. Like I have to be like, okay, well, I'm gonna be like hurting for a few
Oh,
days after this.
yeah.
But I do really like baking. It's just like I can't do it very often. Unfortunately, it's a curse.
I did a episode, infrequent talkie episode, where I just read something that I found on the internet because everybody was blowing up on it in our circles on Twitter about the
Was it the family sex show?
family sex
I watched
show.
that whole video. That was, oh man, like I was so uncomfortable. When you were reading it, I was like, I was like, don't talk to me
Apparently,
like
they
that.
actually get naked on stage. Apparently, it's a lot worse than even I showed. And they went through and they're scrubbing the website now of all the stuff that I showed.
Dude, oh my God, it's fucked. It's fucked up. Like just hearing you say it out loud, it's like this sounds like a Law and Order SVU episode.
Yeah. Like, what's that guy, Chris something, would come in
Yeah.
and like how to catch a pet rapey guy or something like
Yeah,
that.
he's gonna come and like throw you against the wall and be like,
I
you.
should have hired the my friend to come in and storm raid as the FBI agent and SWAT me. That would be great. But I bring that up because we're talking about the woman and we're talking about the body, and I guess we touched on man, but I think that it is linked, the sexual libertinism, the disassociation. And I don't want to be prescriptive at all and say that women and men are only for reproducing, that sex is all about reproducing, but having lost that or distance ourselves so much from that, it seems kind of inevitable that we would treat sex as, just a candy bar or just some sort of transactional thing. And then once it becomes that, then why not just inculcate that in children? Why not just say your penis is basically a candy bar? Somebody's going to want to eat it, so go ahead and give it to them, right? So because there's no meaning there, and not that the
Yeah.
meaning has to be uh, completely circumscribed by the procreative aspect of sex, but without the consequences to weight that. It's got to be weighted there. I think it has to be weighted in that function
Yeah.
and not solely defined by it. It doesn't have to. It's like sex isn't just about baby making. Just this woman isn't just about baby making either. Sex is also pleasurable. It also has to do with releasing stress and all these other things, and blah 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 blah.
Bonding.
And bonding, oxytocin or whatever it's called.
And vasopressin. That's the male version of
Ooh,
oxytocin.
so we're suppressing our vasms. Is that what's going on?
Yeah.
Vasopressin.
No,
Okay.
it's like I guess like women release a lot of oxytocin and then men release some, but like they release more
Do
vasopressin.
you know what that is or what that does?
It's a hormone
It makes us
or
like
yeah, it's a hormone associated with like
sleeping.
overcoming a challenge.
Oh yeah, okay. Like conquering a
Yeah.
mountain.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Huh.
So no, but what you just said about the meaning and like how that, impacts, the discussion about kids, that reminds me of a tweet that I saw today where they were asking, what is it about sex that makes it so bad? If you're forced to have sex, how is that worse than being forced to work, cooking,
Yeah.
or coal
But
mining or
your
something like that?
dad your mom telling you to do the dishes and your dad forcibly penetrating you at night. What's the actual difference
What's the
between this?
difference? What's the difference? Like that's so dangerous that this
Slippage.
total like stripping of sex from any meaning into just a pure physical activity that can feel good or it can suck, but it's nothing more than that. Like that, I feel like that's legitimately where it might be taken by some people. I don't know if that's the intention of like, for example, the person that was arguing that on Twitter today, but that's I can see like where that could be taken.
Well, I mean, that's the question because when people are, and I didn't get into this because this is the question about that I didn't ask on that episode about the family sex show. Wait, I have to. Okay. Is that why are people offended? Why is that offensive? If we are and we have to test these liberal values that we have, like we want a certain amount of openness, but why is this offensive? And if we walk it a little bit back away from, this is age inappropriate and leave that off the table, why is it kind of weird or gross or funky for just a sex show like this? Some sort of weird, puerile, sing-songy. Is this your chronic cat? You gonna pet your chronic cat?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I had to let him outside because he was throwing a little bit of a fit, wanting to go outside. It's like his go outside time. So, no, but can my camera fix itself, please?
You're good.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if there is no meaning to sex, then like what are the answers to these questions? But then I feel like unfortunately when you start getting into like sex has meaning, okay, well then what is its meaning? And like that's where you get into like, you get into that area where some might call you sexist or conservative or puritanical. But
Mm-hmm.
it's like, if sex doesn't have any meaning, it can be easily taken down these roads that we've been discussing, where
If
people
there's no
don't see a
meaning,
clear.
where's the morality? If there's no
Yeah, if
meaning, how
there's
do you
no
know
meaning,
what's
where's
good
the
and bad?
morality?
Yeah.
but we've been taught that assigning morality to sex outside of consent is puritanical and bad and oppressive and sexist.
What's your thought on consent and how's that changed over time? Not personally being
Yeah.
consented or consenting, but just like the
Yeah.
discourse around it. How did it? Were you taught about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how
So
is it discussed or conveyed, or was it for you?
For me, I definitely learned about it through like Tumblr. Like it was very much like, you need to like, ask consent every step of the way. You need to like ask if you can kiss somebody. You need to ask if you can put your arm around them. You need to ask if you can put your other arm around them.
So
You need to
it's all
ask if
verbal.
you can slightly lean in. Yeah. Which is so interesting because this is kind of like the ideology on Tumblr, but then on the other hand, you have like these exact same people reading like the most disgusting like rape fan fiction. Like
Oh,
that it's
oh,
very interesting.
okay.
Yeah, that's a thing. It's controversial, but it is, I mean, you can just go on archive of our own and like see how many very
Yeah.
dubious plot lines there are. So that's just something I
About
find interesting.
violating the consent. So there's the
Yeah.
taboo and then the breaking of the taboo, which completes the circuit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of how I was taught about it. Um, and I mean, obviously, I'm not against consent. I don't think that anybody should be violating anybody else. But I think, like, that's taking it a bit too far. And I think it's kind of an overcompensation for losing that meaning of sex, where it's like, okay, well, the way that, people used to, for better or for worse, whether it had flaws or it didn't, whatever, how people used to develop a morality around sex was through these kind of like uh, behavior prescriptions about like, you
Mm-hmm.
need to, wait to have sex until marriage, or sex is for procreation. Not saying I completely agree with that, but that's, how, one society, our society, American and like British and a lot of Christian societies did, formulate a morality around sex. But then once you throw all of that out as just oppressive, bad nonsense about a man in the sky telling you not to have sex because he
Yeah.
hates you feeling pleasure, then how do you form a morality around sex that doesn't let it like completely go crazy? And I
From
think like
nonsense to nonce sense.
yeah, real. Yeah. We don't like the nonsense. So let's bring in the nonsense. That's so much better than the nonsense. Nonsense is bad, nonsense is good.
Let's meme this. With I was thinking about like with the consent model of sexual interplay. One, it's verbal, so it's very procedural, but it takes away the good and the bad of it. The trade-off is that things are now predictable, and the problem is that things are now predictable. There's no play anymore. There's no cues anymore that are non-verbal. And I think that this arose specifically within Tumblr because Tumblr is visual and verbal. So you have a bunch of talking and a bunch of images, but there's no actual human relationship beyond talking. So it's really difficult in any literature to actually simulate a very full, wholesome sexual interaction. I've tried several times. Being a writer, so you have to have a sex scene. Well, how do you make that as alive as possible? You don't just you break it down into the sex, or you lean into the eroticism. There's different levers you can use with eroticism, but trying to infuse that with all the full senses and the softness and the openness and that whole organic ordeal is very difficult to reduce into language. It's actually probably impossible to reduce into language. You have to do a lot of tricks to get it into language, and then to reduce it into consent, to leach away any of the bad feelings, to leach away any of the unpredictableness of it, robs those two young people, let's just say, Just like if they were to, there's movies where you have young people making out or having sex for the first time, and they start drinking beforehand. I'm like, why would you want to drink before doing that? Like, would you not want to be completely cognizant of that? But I guess there's a
Mm,
lot of fear there, and a lot of
yeah.
other reasons to do it, or the reduction of that exchange into something that's purely physical.
I think there's a lot of incentives to do that, not just culturally, but also, yeah, because of that fear. Because I also think like I think, you know, sex and also like maturing and also
Hmm.
the dynamics between people, but especially between men and women, like they do carry like inherent anxieties. Like they're not supposed to just all work perfectly smoothly and make everyone comfortable all the time.
Hmm.
Like I think that's just like human life. So I think that, people, no matter how, much you tell everyone to make consent before every handshake.
Hmm.
It's like it's always going to be there, but I think like we're kind of like, god, we've just like completely lost the ability to talk about any of these things in like a real
Hmm.
honest way, because it's like we have all of these like ideological beliefs about you know
Yeah,
what is.
we've gone from like don't judge to how dare you judge. People are so
Yeah,
judgmental about
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
figure out, well, how do we judge? How do we judge?
yeah.
How do we judge? And then you
I
have to
just,
ask, well, why? Why is this
yeah,
meaningful? And then can you do a family sex show that actually like does that? Like shows, okay, this is what this actually means without the family. Can you do that without the family?
yeah,
'Cause there's a proper way to talk about sex within the family because sex is what causes the family. And then there's an improper way that erodes the family, I think, in a way,
yeah,
or makes it too unstable, as I would
totally.
say.
I mean, I would say like for like a prepubescent child, like the only situation in which I would think that would be like appropriate is if like the child like saw a sexual material or like a sexual act and then had questions about it, and then the parents are kind of like tasked with, figuring out how to explain that in an age appropriate way. But I don't see any reason for an adult to initiate a process of introducing sex themes
Well,
to a
to be fair,
prepubescent child.
they were suggesting that that the kid do it on their own on Google and go look on Google for animals
Dude,
masturbating, right? So
someone tweeted, they said like I went on Google and I looked up the things that they were looking up, and because they say type in animals masturbating, and this person did that. They went on Google and they typed in animals masturbating, and they bestiality human on animal
well,
porn
okay, but their
videos came
safe
up.
search wasn't on, and Google had already like been like looking for what they would really want to see. So
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it doesn't strike me as improbable that weird, disgusting porn would come up if a child looked up animals
I
masturbating.
don't even think like even if there was no humans involved, how would that not be appropriate? I guess and
And
other you were saying like if a child stumbles upon sexually explicit material, and then the parents have to explain that to them, or a child just grew up on a farm or like visits a farm and then like
yeah,
sees that
yeah,
process, and then
yeah,
the question is what separates us from the animals. That's the interesting thing about the family sex show. So anybody's listening, family sex show, they kind of got canceled, but they were specifically 5 and up, and they suggested that children go look online for animals masturbating and then draw animals masturbating. And then there was this whole discussion about how to touch yourself and where would you like to be touched and all this stuff. It was really weird. So you can check my video out and stuff. But
do watch the video
what's
because it's disgusting, but it's like the way he covers it is kind of funny. So it's a good video.
it's so gross. Sorry, I subjected everybody to that. Um, can't believe I got away with that. But it also comes down to what separates us not from the animals wholly in this we are above the animals or different than the animals, but what about sex as an animal action or a biological action doesn't actually capture what it means or what it does. I don't think he can reduce it into biology any more than he can reduce man and woman into biology. It builds out of that, and you have to understand all that. But there's something
Yeah.
special, even if it's just a little bit on top. And I think that inculcating in young people, and to be age appropriate, I would say probably 14 or 15, maybe younger. But and I don't know. I'm not saying that I would ever do this, but to try to give them a sense of what aspects around the act of just touching somebody intimately really provide space for that to be enjoyed and to be safe. And one would be trust. How do you have trust? And trust takes time. So learning patience, you can really break it down into very simple things. Just be very patient. Don't rush into
Yeah.
anything. Don't let things get ahead of you, and be really sure and just really just be aware, listen
Yeah.
to your body, listen to the other person. And it doesn't really have to be verbalized, but just be
Yeah.
aware.
It doesn't have to be explained in like such literal terms. Like there are principles that I think parents can like introduce to their kids that can be applied to various aspects of life that will then, like hopefully guide them to A, pick partners that are, appropriate and trustworthy, and then B, interact with those partners in a way that, lets them have, their life the way that it's going to happen for them. Like it's
Hmm.
weird that these people want to control how like a child or a teenager like experiences the process of discovering sexuality in
Oh,
relationships.
yeah.
It's so weird. Like to me it's like, well, if someone doesn't know what the clit is or something and then doesn't have a great first time, like that, like so what? Like that's just the way that their life unfolds, and then maybe later their life will continue to unfold in a different way, and whatever. And then as an adult they can have these kinds of conversations. But like why are we trying to control the way that a young person experiences this kind of development? It's so weird.
Well, what do you mean by control? Are you suggesting that the material specifically in what I covered in the previous video is controlling or hemming in or
Yeah, by
directing it in a very specific way? And in
by
what way?
introducing all of this information in such a explicit way about, like, you know, I haven't watched the Family Sex Show. I don't
Yeah.
think anybody
Well,
has because
they had
it
that
hasn't been out.
encyclopedia up, so there was a lot of
They do have
words.
an encyclopedia, but to my understanding, like they're the intent of it is to like inform about, the body and like
Hmm.
sexual interactions, with, with the goal of making a young person informed so that they can, better experience pleasure and then better please a partner. So I think it's like there's kind of an agenda there
Hmm.
with like, okay, we want, they think they're doing a good thing, but they do have an outcome intended for these kids. Like the outcome that they're intending is for these kids to, avoid awkward and uninformed sexual situations and just get right to like the pleasure and like have a pleasurable experience and be able to give another person a pleasurable experience. And to me it's just really 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 weird that
Hmm.
they want like a child and like a teenager to avoid the process of like, learning about that on their own and like coming to their own conclusions through life experience about like what makes a good partner, what makes a good, experience for me, what is pleasurable for me. Like you will learn that through your life. And like maybe some people don't, and that's unfortunate. And maybe previous cultural attitudes that we have been very repressive, especially to women. But
Hmm.
like I just don't think that that's an excuse for intervening in a child's development like that. Like you can talk to adults. Adults can talk to adults about, pleasure and sex and all that kind of stuff. But I think, kids like they'll figure it out. Like it'll be fine. They will learn how to have sex
Hmm.
when that's developmentally appropriate for them. Every freaking animal on this planet does.
Yeah, it's really cart before the horse, and it does feed into the controlling nature of certain aspects of the transgender phenomena. It's like we can control puberty, we can control development, we can control how people see us, we can control how the sexual aspect, how sex happens, and control is a part of things, but also there's nature that's going on, and the process of actually becoming a full human being is participation, not control, right? Not just a consent,
Yeah.
a transactional consent, but like a mutual discovery, a mutual
Yeah.
invention. and then
Yeah.
the disappointments and the expectations and all that stuff. But those disappointments and those expectations and those ignorances discovered is actually a part of like you actually gaining something special with that human being that you interacted with
Yeah.
consensually and age appropriately, right? It's like my first girlfriend, like there's nobody else like that for me, like we really imprinted on it, and it was messy. It was a long time ago, but that is, it's sacred or special. It's special, you know.
And I just think it's so wrong that adults want to like intervene before that and introduce kids and even like teenagers to like all of these different sexual themes that they didn't even understand. And that reminds me of something that I know Sasha Ayad has talked about. And it's also something that like I observed and experienced too, where it's like you have these teenagers where because of the internet, like they may not have ever held another person's hand. Like they've
Mm.
never been in a relationship, they've never had a kiss, but they know about every out there weird sexual kink that
Mm-hmm.
they have this impression that like, oh, this is all about pleasure. Like I remember like, and sorry to get crude, but I remember like being like a 14-year-old, like complete, like utter relationship virgin, like never flirted with a boy ever in my life. But I knew about like 10-inch dragon dildos.
Oh,
Like I thought that was like a normal thing that like adults did
okay.
with like they're meant to like emulate like various like cartoon hentai dragons.
Oh,
And yeah,
we went there
um
again.
yeah, yeah. So, but I think like that's something that's I think incredibly weird for development, where it's like you have these kids where it's like they have no
Yeah,
concept of what sexuality or intimacy with another person
yeah.
is, but they have this like
Encyclopedia.
encyclopedic knowledge of kinks and sex and everything.
There was a moment in our stream with Wokel where I asked about. I posed at the end. I got a couple of women got really angry at me for drag. They thought I was mocking you, but it came like I said like something. I asked you guys something about like an awkward romantic incident in high school, and both of you are like, "Well, I didn't hold hands until I was 20."
Yeah, we were both
So
like
cute,
loners.
so cute.
Oh man. You're like the Chad and we're the virgins and you're like making fun of us.
Sorry.
Bullying us. You would have stuffed me into a
I
locker in
would
high school.
not. I was a very kind person. I would have just met you at youth group and tried to make you figure out what made you laugh. That was my MO for my teenage years. Figure out how to make the girls laugh.
Okay, but I wasn't a girl.
Oh, during your teenage times? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I probably would have tried anyways.
I hope you would have converted me back to being a girl so I didn't do dumb shit.
No,
But
you had to discover that on your own.
yeah.
So trads then,
Yeah.
right wing. Are you right wing? Somebody was like, somebody says that. Somebody said that distantly about you. Like, I know you're kind of right wing-ish or something like that.
I mean,
There's
I
something
guess like
alluring about the right wing to me.
yeah, the way I kind of see it is like, okay, first of all, what is right wing? I think like in our culture right now, like anything that isn't like I do think there's a genuine right wing, like there's a history of kind of like, right wing philosophies throughout time and throughout cultures, like that's a real thing. But I think in our culture, like right wing is just kind of anything that isn't like subscribing to this
Mm-hmm.
intensely strict doctrine on the left. And so in that sense I am right wing. In other senses perhaps no, like I think I have um I don't want to say the cliche thing of like I agree with some things on the left, I agree with some
Well,
things on
just
the
don't
right,
do
but
like fiscal conservative social liberal.
no,
Okay.
yeah, no, I think that's like a very outdated paradigm at this point. Like the whole fiscal. I mean, I went through my libertarian phase when I was like leaving the wokeness, and like people used to always make fun of me for that because I
What
would
do you
I would tweet
mean?
things.
What were you doing?
I
Just
don't know.
like
I would just tweet things like socialism is bad. Like I would just like
Taxes are
really,
theft.
yeah, taxation is theft, yeah. And kind of like, just kind of silly, underinformed, like kind of libertarian stuff. But it was appealing to me because I'd never really like I had always thought of coming from like a very sheltered upbringing, I think. Like I had formed these kind of radical beliefs based on stuff that I was reading online. And then like the libertarian thing seemed so much more like normal. Like it seemed like okay, this
Hmm.
seems more true than the crazy shit I thought I believed because it's just so much more normal. It's not trying to have a revolution. It's not trying to completely change society. It's not angry. It's not resentful. It's not violent. It's just kind of like it kind of makes sense, and that's so I was kind of like drawn to it for that reason.
I can sense that there's like a release or like just release of pressure to just like kind of play in that playground.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like I think I needed that. I think I needed to like take my stroll like around through the different political ideologies, and I think I did that. Like I went to like the libertarian side, and then I spent time in other right wing circles, and but now I think I've kind of like come back, not around necessarily, but it's like I'm just kind of I think I'm my own person.
Hmm.
So I think whether or
Good
not
luck
I'm
with that.
right wing, that's probably relative. I think a lot of the people who call themselves right wing would not call me right wing, but then a lot of the people who call themselves left wing would call me left wing.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know how useful it is, but I mean, I'm willing to question ideas about sex, gender,
Hmm.
race that,
Oh, are you
are
questioning your race now?
yeah, I am
You're gonna
questioning my race.
dolezal it up?
Well, I mean, some people can't agree. Are Slavs white?
What would you be?
I don't know. I've always just been like a white person, but there's people do debate this. They debate are Slavs white because it's like you have Russians, which that I feel like that
Asiatic.
is genuine. Yeah, they're kind of Asiatic. But then you have like a Polish person where it's like we may be kind of like ethnically related
A
to
person of
some
Poland.
types of yeah person of Poland. Yeah, um, POP. Uh,
Yeah, you know me.
Yeah. So I mean, it's complicated, but yeah, people do. It's funny if you go on like 4chan is a ridiculous website, but they'll have they'll hash out these important debates of our time, like are Slavs white or are they racial slur?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been listening to interviews with Curtis Yarvin. He's a monarchist. He was like a proto alt rightist, but that
He's
was
getting
way back in the
roasted.
day. It's really interesting, really interesting guy. I want him on the channel. That's why I'm listening to so much of him. So I'm trying to like
Oh,
get a
you should. I
angle on
mean,
him.
I've listened to like a few podcasts with him, and he's definitely like a smart guy. Just I've never, delved into any of his
Yeah.
writing or anything. But you definitely should. I think like exploring the kind of like right wing ecosystem, I think would be interesting.
It's really there's a lot of different things. I accidentally interviewed a fascist, and his
Which
vocoder
one?
didn't work. So I'm not going to say who, but
Oh,
he had it like his vocoder didn't work, so I wasn't allowed to publish it. But because we didn't record because his vocoder didn't work because he hides his voice and stuff. It like I was surprised. It
I
like went deep. I'm like, whoa, really? Like, whoa, okay,
I think I
okay.
know. I think I have a guess. I think I have a, is he a relatively popular Twitter poster?
I don't want to.
Okay, okay,
It's
okay, okay.
just really fascinating. It was just really fascinating. Like, there's a lot going on in here. There's all these different subcategories and little things going on, and they all have different kind of like weird aesthetic. The aesthetic is
Dude, it's so
like
fascinating.
chiseled like Greek busts that's very homoerotic, but they're kind of traddy, you know, it's like homo trads and stuff. And then the anime trads, is like, wait, you're anime avatar and you're right wing? Like, what's going on in here?
It's so fascinating. I mean, like, I just feel like, oh man, like that's why I like follow so many different people who are kind of on the right because it's just like, oh man, like it's so fascinating. Like on the left, kind of like, even you'll have like different pockets of leftism, like you'll have like the rad femmes and you'll have the woke people, and they're obviously not the same, but I do think there's kind of a little bit of like a structure there that is like
A
very
uniformity.
homogeneous. Yeah,
Homogeneous,
there's
yeah,
a
I was going to say that.
conformity there. But then on the right, it's like there's none of that. It's just a bunch of like disagreeable freaking weirdos
Maybe that's
who
what.
who like they I don't know, you don't have to agree with all of it, and some of it is really wacky, but some of it isn't very wacky, and some of it actually makes sense.
Yeah.
And you have some of the most intelligent people, like I think on the in the country, like on our side of the freaking planet, who are,
Yeah. They're very,
they're the
very
ones who
smart.
are really, yeah, there's some really, really intelligent people who do a lot of research and just like, I don't know, it's so much more dynamic and colorful and fascinating than I guess like most of like the left side of the
It's really
spectrum.
weird. It seems like an avant-garde kind of like a burgeoning, like a new cultural, like punk. It's just like there's something
Totally.
fomenting over there. So I should actually
Yeah.
just like take the hit and, the reputational hit. Not that it matters. I didn't make it on the latest hate speech German state funded.
I know. Me neither.
Well, you're going to be on, well, you were on Tucker. You have to have your own channel. You're not quite there. You'll get there. You'll get there. You need to
I
have
don't
like a
know.
base. Maybe we should do a regular podcast and get your name boosted up.
Yeah, we should do it. I just don't know. I'm like I don't know. I don't know. I've never really done anything like that, so I guess it's very intimidating to me.
Done anything like
Uh,
what? Like be a superstar of the detransitioner world? Like the poster child?
Not even of the detransitional world,
What are
like
you
so
talking
many of them
about? You
hate me
literally
so.
are the poster growth, like you and Kira Bell.
Well, yeah, I guess I am the poster girl, but I don't think that's my base. Like a lot of
Oh.
them just don't like me. Well, not a
Oh.
lot of them, but a subset of them don't like me, so I feel bad. But
Hmm. Females? Males? We don't have to get into that
email.
on
Oh yeah, all my detransition friends except Grace, and maybe like one or two other people are all men, which is really interesting.
Sinead. Sinead. Sinead.
Sinead, but I mean, yeah, we're like, we follow each other and stuff, but we don't really like talk and
Oh yeah,
like
she's Scottish and a little older than you. So
I don't talk to Scottish people.
well, yeah. Somebody. I'm sorry to get off the rails, but somebody specifically was asking for stories of being harassed by a Scottish actor on Twitter. They're like, "Has anybody has stories of harassment by a Scottish actor?" I'm like, "What is going on here?" So I had to retweet it. So I guess somebody's trying to do a hit piece on the Scottish acting community. It's coming down the pike. I don't know what's that
I
about.
wonder. Oh man, I guess that doesn't have anything to do with what Stella O'Malley has been going through, because
Oh
that's
yeah,
Irish. That's not even the same. But
yeah.
some actor or something from Ireland has just been like coming for her, which
For
is crazy. I
Stella,
don't know why she, like of all people, is like constantly getting bullshit from like every side. It pisses me off.
it's so weird. She's just so awesome. It's like what?
She's just like such a kind and like thoughtful person. It's like,
Yeah,
but maybe that's the reason why. It's like she is like a very like deep and kind and thoughtful person. So maybe that's why they
she's a
come after her,
threat.
because that's a threat.
She's not like cheap like us.
Yeah,
Memey,
yeah.
disagreeable, right leaning.
She's not just out there saying they're transing kids, which has been my recent thing, because
Is
it's
that
like
your don't
that's
say
what.
gay? They're transing kids. Is that your
Yeah,
thing?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean that's what I think that's effective, because it's like that is what they're doing, but it's also, it's
Yeah.
like that's a lot more catchy than saying like, they are like, halting puberty and like explaining the whole thing. You can just say like they're trans and kids.
I'm gonna read a couple super chats. Do you mind?
Yeah.
Somebody had a couple
Let's do it.
questions for you. At least one did. So we're gonna open it up for questions. If you guys want questions, just put it up there. Okay. Oh. Yeah, I think this is it. AD gave a couple, so I'm just going to read AD super chat. I don't think this is the question, so I'll have to look for that. My psychology class, it was brought up that notions of consent are male dominated, and by me mentioning the of due process, and by mentioning due process is affirming of that dominance. So due process is a form of male domination, I
Well,
guess.
I understand that part. I don't understand how consent is male dominated. I guess maybe they're saying that it's like it's male dominated because men who assault women will allege that they consented, and then due process is male dominated because it's not just automatically believing women. You're giving the man a chance to allege that he did not assault the woman.
What happens when I'm not going to say that women ever contradict themselves. I'm never going to. I'm not saying that. I'm not suggesting that. Okay. I'm not saying that a woman would ever contradict themselves. But
No
what?
woman on this planet has ever contradicted
Yeah,
herself.
never. But what happens when a woman contradicts another woman? Which one do you believe, or do you just have to hold them both in the same space? Is that what your just brain has to just like
Then
broaden?
then you have to go. You have to dig a little bit deeper. So which woman is white and which woman
Oh,
is
really?
not?
You have to go
And
intersectional?
if they're both not white, well then, which ones are they? And then we need to do an analysis on, which is more oppressed or not. And
Okay.
we're gonna need 5 to 7 business days to get back to you after we do our analysis.
BelieveTheUnderdog.com.
Yeah.
Send us the DNA of the two women in your life that are contradicting each other. We'll tell you who to believe. I can't find I can't find there. Somebody asked you a question and I lost it here. It was a super chat, but I can't find it now. Oh well. So what's coming up next? You're gonna be on Tim Pool next week.
Yeah, on let me check the date. On Thursday next week. It starts at 8 p.m. Eastern. Timcast IRL.
And you and Lydia and Tim, and is there another person that you're aware of?
I don't know if anyone else is going to be there. I assume so.
Do you have a nemesis, and do you think that they will be on Timcast with you?
No, I don't have a
You
nemesis.
don't have
I
like
don't.
anybody worthy of that title?
No, no. Yeah.
That's good. You're kind of a Christian.
I've been thinking of taking the Christian pill.
Which brand? What is it called? Which prescription?
I don't
Catholic,
know yet, but
Greek
yeah,
Orthodox.
I've just been interested in it. I'm not religious, but one of my close friends has recently, after like literally kind of like over a year of kind of like struggling with this, like you know, he's become Christian. So I'm
Huh.
like, I really respect this person and I understand where he's coming from and he's saying some very interesting things. So I want to look into this further. So I don't know if I'm gonna like become Christian, but I am interested because people keep telling me I think
You're a
like a Christian.
trendy girl
I
kind.
know, I know.
Here's a question: what platforms would you want to be on? And I think, who would you want to be interviewed by or interview yourself? That's a question from the audience.
Oh man. I think like Joe Rogan would be huge. It'd be huge.
Huge.
Um Huge. That would be really cool. Because I want to be on like platforms that I myself like. Like that's kind of like something that I'm encountering as I guess I'm like getting more attention. It's like how do I choose what to do? And I think like I want to prioritize like people that, I actually like have enjoyed their content before. So Joe
Hmm.
Rogan for sure. That would be really exciting. And who I want to interview, oh my God, I'm not going to say who this is, but there's this like younger detransitioner that I stumbled upon. And like she's just very interesting. Like I think her story is very interesting.
Does her name
And
starts
she,
with a C?
yeah,
Oh, I ruined that one. I was gonna have her on, and then the
yeah,
Exolansic Karen Davis thing like blew up, and she thinks I'm a bad person now.
that was, oh, really?
Yeah, I lost that interview.
Oh,
She seemed like such
no.
a brilliant thing. So I might try to like maybe position it because that whole ship, I don't know, I don't want to get into the drama, but the whole Exolansic, like anti-Semitic, that whole thing like has gone down spectacularly. And there's this huge like 50 page 62-page thread on Kiwi Farms about the whole thing, and it's just
Really?
it's insane what's going on with that whole thing. It's really, it's like it's out of this world. Like her and Karen Davis are just like so
I need to read that. You need to send me that
I'll
thread.
send you the link. It's
I
entertaining.
don't
I really
know. I
think
don't
that
know much
Exelancic's
about.
gonna be reborn, and I really want her back, but things
I don't know. Like,
cost
ah,
me that
man,
interview.
because before this stuff broke out, I actually watched your interviews with Exulancic, and I was like, how refreshing. Benjamin is a friend of a rad femme. Like that is so refreshing.
And it's never
But
doomed to last
then
that long, man. It's really difficult.
they are so fleeting. But and then I don't really know like what the drama is over exactly. I know there's like something with like intersex people or something like that.
Yeah.
But I watched you did like a live stream where you read like this comment thread by this person who was like Exulancic is our savior. Like we must listen to Exulancic. It was so funny. I was dying laughing watching that at like 3 in the morning.
Fangirldom is intense. You girls know how to
It's
fan.
just like the way this person was talking, they were like, Exulancic has told us. We know because Exulancic has
You really
imparted this.
you are a Christian. You just you know the iconography. Like you slipped right
No,
into it.
I am just paying my dues to Exulancic.
Super chat. $5 from AD. Are you familiar? This is a question for you. Are you familiar with Dr. James Cantor? I am. Are you?
Yeah.
Controversial figure. I like him. Very controversial, though. And the American Academy of Pediatrics' outright rejection of anything other than affirmation therapy of trans kid. I don't think
Yeah.
Cantor is affirmation only.
He's no, he's not supportive of that. He's critical of it.
No.
He's a very interesting figure. I
But are you
he's
aware of this affirmation only thing? I know that Florida has come out against it. It should be interesting. Like they.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I've actually been talking with some people from the Florida Health Department, and they are really serious about fighting this. Like
Really?
yeah, they're like this guy just like has been messaging me for like 2 days now. Like he's really I think like they're really waking up to it and they're becoming very passionate about fighting back. Like I think ever since the federal government put out those guidelines about affirmation only, I think like that's really waking a lot of people up because it's just insane for the federal government to come out and say that like we need to trans all the kids.
Yeah, I think transing the kids is much better than groomer. It's very specific.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
specific, and it's uncontestable. And like once
yeah.
people actually like admit it, I mean, Saki is never going to admit it. She's going to weep about it. But I think they're completely captured. I think the administration is completely captured by this thing. They have no
What's
idea
your
what they're
take
doing.
on Saki? Like, do you think that she's like a sociopath, or do you think she's like completely like lying, or do you or like putting on a persona, or do you think like she's actually
Hmm.
like a confused person? Like what is your take on
So
her?
there was a 2 minute clip of Saki crying about
I
answering
saw that.
or about combating the Florida or these state laws that are trying to abuse children or whatever. So the video is really interesting. There was articles. I'm like, where's the video? Finally found the video, and she's like talking. She's literally talking like she's having this conversation, and it gets really emotional. And I'm watching it. I'm like, this is I think she's feeling this, but it's still an act. And the whole thing, I'm
Yeah.
like, she's subconsciously saying that she's just a puppet. Like this is just my like archetypal thing. She's like she just is saying what everybody else is saying, and I think that's what
Yeah.
they're all doing. I think the entire Biden admin is just like, okay, this is Obama had gay marriage. We're gonna have the trans kid,
Oh,
and
jeez.
the
Yeah.
rhetoric it conflates the whole thing. They don't see any difference between one thing and the other. They're not aware. And so I was thinking because I was talking with Fourth Wave Now with Denise, who's an excellent woman. I should have you
I
both
love that
on.
woman.
You guys should. I should have you
Oh
both on.
yeah, I love Denise so much. We should definitely do a stream with both of us. She's a like I watched her interview of her, but there's just like so much more in that woman's brain. like
We already did one interview and it wasn't jam packed with information enough. So she said, "Hold that one. We're gonna do another one." So
yeah, she was telling me about it and she was like, I hated the first one.
anyway, so she's got the resources on actually showing, like she's got all the receipts. She's an
Yeah,
amazing one. She's got all the receipts. So we know I'm not the guy that has the receipts. I can barely remember the
yeah.
person that I speak to unless I've spoken to them several times. And even then, I'm like, Helena,
Helena.
Helena, Helena, Helena,
Yeah.
would you like a bottle of beer, Helena? Anyway, so I was talking to her about, because she was talking about the polling is just dire for the Democrats, specifically on this issue of the transing the
Yeah.
kids and the teaching the kids. And it's like Democrats don't want, nobody wants this. So why would the
Yeah.
administration be pushing this and making this their key issue? Everything else is failing, so they're going to double down on castrating children. Like, really? Is that what we're going to do? And I'm like, either they already have, and I did a joke tweet, and people don't understand that I'm being sarcastic. The people are like, are you really thinking this? I'm not. But either they have the next election in the bag, and so they don't care, or they're completely blind. They're completely blind. And that little 2-minute clip of Saki, and it's on my timeline on Twitter, I'll try to link it in the description, really showed me that they really are true believers, but it's still
Yeah.
it's not a true belief. It's just
Yeah.
they bought into this whole thing and this is where it's leading them. I think
Yeah.
they're incapable of not doubling down, and you'd have to go into Lindsay and Wokel's theorizing on this particular politic that we call the left, but I think it's a little bit more specific than that. I don't think they
Yeah.
can get away from it.
There's something someone Corinna, do you know Corinna Cohn?
Yeah, I know, Corinna.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. She was asking on Twitter, like, these people who say, like, Nazis are trying to kill trans kids, like, do they
Wait,
legitimately
people
think
say
that?
that.
Yeah, yeah, like, that, like,
Nazis are trying to kill trans kids. Okay, one, where are the Nazis? Two, what is a trans kid? Like, this is.
exactly, exactly. But that's what they say, like, Ron DeSantis is a Nazi who wants to kill trans kids,
Yeah.
this kind of shit. So she was asking, like, is that like a legitimate belief, or is it just like a manipulation tactic? And I was saying that, like, it is a genuine belief and it is also not at the same time. Like, when I think back to myself when I was indoctrinated, because I really supported, like, transing kids, I thought that was awesome. And so, like, for myself, like, I think on some level I understood that it's a reach, because my logic was, if if they don't transition, they will kill themselves. That
Mm-hmm.
it's like almost 100% positive that if you don't affirm them and trans them, they'll kill themselves. That's what I believed. And I think, like, on some level I kind of knew that wasn't true, because you have, like, all sorts of evidence to the contrary, not just in, like, scientific papers, but also the fact that there hasn't been, like, a trans suicide epidemic for all of history. Like, it's just now, like, we're kind of alleging it. So I think, like, I understood that that was a reach, but at the same time there is, like, an emotional process that's separate from the rational process. That it's like this, like, idea, there's like this idea that comes alive in your head when you're really indoctrinated about, like, the trans kids, oh, they're the most important thing, and they're like this holy thing, and then the Nazis are coming in and they are killing them, they're brutally causing the brutal deaths of the trans kids. And it's like, that in itself is, like, separate from the purely kind of, like, rational, like, do I really believe this is happening? It kind of, like, takes over. So I think,
Huh.
like, that I can see that happening to some of these people, like Saki, for example, where it's like, yeah, she is crying, she's having this emotional experience, but rationally, I doubt that she truly believes that, like, if you were to, like, sit her down and, like, do anti-cult indoctrination to her for, like, a week and a half, like, I don't know if she would still believe in trans kids.
I'm
But
sorry. Could you? I want to see your hand gesture for anti. What were you doing? Anti cult indoctrination. What were you
oh
doing with
yeah,
your hand?
anti-cult.
Okay. 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 Thank you. I
Yeah,
just want to see
if you
how
just
you
sit
would do
someone
it.
down and go like this. Tip for all the ROGD parents out there: if you just sit them down and go
Okay.
like this.
It's the vertical motion of loose lipped, loose wristed hands that really like persuade a child back into their body.
Yeah,
It's like a
yeah,
wave pool.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think they believe it, but they don't. They believe it on like a emotional level, and the
Woot
emotions take over.
Woot Baseman asks, super chat, Helena, you would be a voice of reason and fresh perspective on those Twitch panels. Would reach a younger audience. Thoughts? Spelled T
You
H
mean
O
like with
T
like
S.
Vosh?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Do you want to go on Vouch? Vouch was on somebody on So's.
Yeah, Deborah.
Uh,
So
yeah.
I don't know. I don't. I mean, it would
I don't
depend
know what a
on.
Twitch panel is. Do you know what a Twitch
I think
panel
it's
is?
like I think they're talking about like debates. Like there's all these like political Twitch
Oh,
streamers who
okay.
do these
Yeah.
like debates and stuff. And like I don't know. Like maybe I will at some point, but
Yeah.
because I've listened to some of these debates and it's just like there's an art to debating that goes beyond like how well you are able to express your views. Like there's all sorts of tricks that trip people up, like dishonest stuff, and you know like it's just they'll just kind of like steamroll over each other. And
Yeah.
I think that it's something that you need to have a skill in debating, not just like a solid foundation of your views. And I have a very solid foundation of my views, but just seeing how these debates kind of go, like I just don't, I would feel very nervous about that, not having ever really debated
More
before.
nervous or less than going on Tim Pool?
Less, or I mean more, sorry. Yeah, definitely
Oh,
more
more.
because it's
Okay.
like, yeah, just watch like a Vosh or something or Destiny debate.
I
And it's
can't.
like they're it's just a totally different thing. It's like
I don't learn
they're
anything from
so
from those
yeah.
things. I
I know
never
you don't
learn
really
anything.
learn anything, and it's just like dumb as hell. I don't know. So I don't know. Maybe someday in the future, but it's not something I'm really setting my sights on right now.
You're the new hero of Dilbert Gregg. Dilbert Gagg, sorry. Dilbert Geg.
Who
Just want to
dat?
let you know that. Who did that?
Oh, is that the super chatter?
Yeah, it's a super chatter. Dilbert.
Oh, thank you,
You,
Dilbert.
you, you have a new. What happens when somebody calls you a hero? That's not a fan. I don't know what that is. Oh, wait, hold on. Somebody's going to teach us something. Super chat. I have such sights to show you. Uh-oh. And it's got Ernie with Pinhead, a Pinhead Ernie, or maybe that's Bert. I can't remember which one's which. Yeah, that's Bert. Okay, so the name Kerschner, like Kirschner, is derived from Kerschner, a person making pelt clothing from animal skins. Old European tradition. Your profession becomes your last name. So you're the skinner of beasts, or the tanner,
Hell yeah.
or the pelter. So that's your
Yeah.
your heritage.
That's pretty cool. Thank you
Yeah.
to whoever sent that. That's really
Boyce
cool.
Boyce means from the woods. I'm just like a mossy man. That's all I am. Le bois.
Nice.
So I have to go cook food.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you have things to do. Do you have a special ritual that you'd like to share with the world? Do you have like a special kind of avocado charcoal thing that you put into your ears to forestall the growth of hair in them, or a beauty routine, or like a exercise regimen that you do that you think is really healthy that other people need to know about? This is the
Uh,
awkward question time, and you're being very awkward.
yeah, because I was waiting to like, what kind of routine are we talking? Um, I don't know. I mean, I do a lot of things. Like I have a lot of different practices in my life that are kind of like health and by extension beauty oriented. Um, oh, I guess one thing, beef tallow based moisturizers
Oh,
are very good. So do look into that for anybody who, especially if you have like eczema and stuff, like a beef tallow moisturizer is
does it
really good.
smell
'Cause
like bacon?
no,
Beefy
like if you
bacon?
get it unscented, it has like a very, very, very faint kind of beefy smell to it. But if you get it scented, it's just like a, whatever. It's just like a regular moisturizer. You're not gonna smell like beef. Um, I've used butter before, and that leaves you smelling kind of like creamy. But it's a
That's
really good
what this is
moisturizer.
why I ask these stupid questions, because then I get these awesome answers.
It's a great moisturizer, and everybody that I've told to use butter, they come back and they tell me like this is the best
Where you
moisturizer
just get a
ever.
stick and you.
No, you like, pinch a bit off and then you melt it and then you butter yourself. Like, yeah, one time I was like sitting and watching TV with my boyfriend. I just have like a stick of butter next to me and I'm just like rubbing it on myself. He's like, "This is so weird." He thinks I'm such a freak and it's kind of true. But yeah, I was just buttering myself after getting out of the shower.
Okay, we know that you're allergic to wheat, but dairy is your thing,
No,
at least
dairy's good.
at least externally. One last super chat, and
Okay.
this is the most important super chat of all. Where can we find more of your content, Helena?
So I have a Substack, which you can probably link in the description, maybe.
Yeah, I will, and
Um,
even Richard Dawkins. What?
yeah.
Who else? Who else?
Even,
Everybody's
oh my
showing.
God, yeah. Richard
Phil-
Dawkins tweeted it out, and then Jordan Peterson tweeted it out, and Ann Coulter tweeted out
Ooh.
my Substack 4 separate times.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Are
She
you
went
going
on
to
a
go on her?
rampage tweeting out my Substack.
Oh wow. Are you going to be
Yeah,
on her
which was
show?
kind of interesting. Huh?
Are you going to be on her show? Does she
I
have a
don't
show?
think she has a show.
She doesn't have a show. She just has a book.
She's kind of like a little bit like out of the. I think she kind of like stopped really being all that in the public eye, but um, she's a very interesting woman. I love people who are just kind of like disagreeable like that. Like I just love people who like they just like don't give a shit. They're offensive, and it's not necessarily because I love everything they say on like a
Yeah.
factual basis, but I just especially in women because you get that personality type in men a lot. But I love like a woman who just like
Doesn't butter
does
anybody up. Just lets you butter
doesn't
yourself.
exactly only butters herself.
So you get your Substack. We're going to link it. What's it called?
It's just LaCroix. My weird Twitter
You
spelling. I
changed
know.
it for like 2 weeks. It was
I
Hellcats or
did, and then it
something.
sucked because I couldn't think of anything good, and I still can't think of anything good. And I don't want to make it just my name
I
because
know,
that
I
just
know.
seems kind of like too serious and lame.
Yeah. LaCroix SCZ.
I don't have a good like play on my name.
It'll come. It'll come.
Yeah, someday.
You
But
want to
yeah, so
thank the audience? I want to thank you for joining me. We're
yeah,
toying with
thank
the
you for
idea of
having
making
me.
this a regular thing. So maybe if
Let's do it.
and then we could do a little bit more organized. We can go through material because there's a lot of material we can cover.
Yeah, yeah, and we can have others on as well. Maybe we
Yeah.
can interview some right wing people.
Oh.
Or I guess no, I guess you do your conversations and that's just you. But I don't know. There's a lot of just like
Huh.
interesting people
I think
out
we can
there.
tag team.
Yeah,
I think we're a good pairing. I've been seeking
yeah,
I've been seeking a good pair. But we'll see how the audience responds. But thank you for joining us yet again, Helena
yeah. Thank you for
Kerschner,
having me.
the woman of the pelts,
The Pelter Butterer.
extraordinaire. Of what?
Yeah,
Of pleasure?
Butterer. Butterer.
Butterer. Okay, that's where all the tallow comes from. Good night,
Yeah.
folks.
All right. Bye.